Welcome back to the Law Be With You podcast show. We've got Omar on again, a very knowledgeable guest. As I say, a font of knowledge in cosmic wizardry, especially in law, canon, comic books, and Star Wars. I hope you can live up to that title, Omar.
I'm getting worried now.
We only get the best collaborators on the Law Be With You podcast show. And if you've not subscribed yet on our YouTube channel, Christian the Fandom Geek, please get on there, hit a sub, hit a like button, and comment as well. And if you agree or disagree with any views that we are espousing on the show, please let us know. We're very interested in dialoguing with you guys, the fans. We love fandom, and we appreciate you listening to the podcast show. Okay, we're going to talk about X-Men now.
Yeah.
So all you X-Men fan out there, this is for you. Any Marvel fans, this is for you. Comic book fans, this is for you. Omar, I know that you're a big X-Men geek.
Yes, I am.
Tell us about your love of X-Men.
It's it's just amazing. It is like, for me, it's just like the best comics that you can get. I've always just had a really close affinity to the characters and the storylines. It's the comic book that I've collected since I was probably about 10, so it's been well over 25 years now.
You're giving your
and and I've collected back issues and stuff like that. So it's a universe in its own. Separate from it is connected to the Marvel universe as it is, but it's its own thing too. There's multiple teams, there's multiple characters, there's different timelines. It's always been one of my biggest loves.
Okay, all right. I like X-Men as well. I think, but obviously, I know how much your passion is for the X-Men, and I love that. And I got into the X-Men lore through the movies, not the comic books. So it's a different experience to yours. So obviously, and we will brush on the films a little bit later. So if you kind of have a strong opinion at home listening to this about the films, or if you listen to this at work, we will talk about the films. But first of all, before that, who is your favorite X-Men character and why?
My favorite X-Men character, who is actually one of my favorite characters of all time, is Cyclops.
Okay.
He's the field leader of the X-Men. As a kid, as a glasses wearing geek, he was the representation of actually having a superhero that wears glasses. Was something that was very close to me, and I just remember seeing him with the visor and just thinking that was the coolest thing. I mean, this is before I really got into Star Trek and saw Geordie LaForge with them. But
his visor,
but so I've always been a fan of Scott Summers, Cyclops, and just his character, just this whole idea of what he represents in the law. He's the true believer. He is kind of the one that really believes in the dream of coexistence, and it's been very interesting recently of how he's had to deal with how the world has changed and stuff like that. And he's just I still think he's one of the most compelling characters in comic books.
Brilliant. And he always looks so visually amazing, doesn't he? His power, like in the comic books, obviously, especially as comic books have sort of gone in terms of how they're drawn these days, and how the sort of technology you can have to make comic books look so vivid. He looks amazing. But obviously in the films, how do you feel about him, how he's portrayed in the movies, how he looks, and how the general sort of direction they went within the sort of I guess those X-Men films in the 90s, weren't they, really?
This is big sigh from me, really.
Here we go. Yes,
Cyclops. Cyclops I don't think Cyclops, outside of possibly, and I say that possibly because the original 90s cartoon, I
Yeah.
don't think Cyclops has actually ever been done justice outside of the comic books.
Yeah.
I think they've always sidelined him. The thing that I've always found that made Wolverine great is that
Mm.
Cyclops is his counterpoint.
Yeah.
Not just in kind of as a love rival to Jean Grey, but
Mm.
just philosophically, they kind of have very, very different viewpoints, but they have a mutual respect for each other,
Yeah.
for the most part, anyway.
Yeah.
But I've always thought that them two kind of characters rubbing off each other has always been like the spark that really does kind of get the X-Men and kind of the conversation going about what particular mission they're doing and what's happening.
Mm.
I think the way that Cyclops has been portrayed, I don't think he's ever been really portrayed as the true leader of the X-Men that he is. He's been the kind of the guiding force, the kind of the general, marshalling a whole kind of species. And I don't think any
Wow.
of the TV shows, TV or films have ever kind of portrayed him in that way. They've just kind of portrayed him in a kind of Boy Scout way. I mean, it's
Yeah.
almost the way that they kind of done with Captain America or Superman. That he does fit that archetype.
Yeah.
And with all three of those characters, they actually have a lot more to them than that. But I think even more so with Cyclops, they've never really kind of broken the mold and kind of dug a bit deeper into what that character stands for, what he's been through, and his kind of relations with not just the wider X-Men, but even in his own family.
Right. Okay. Okay. So you mentioned a really good point there about this sort of archetype, and obviously on the lobby with you, we love talking about archetypes.
Yeah.
And if if you haven't listened to previous episodes, go and listen to them. They're on Christian Fandom Geek on YouTube, and they're also on most podcast players. And you will listen to back episodes where we talk about archetypes, and they're very important in good storytelling, aren't they?
Yes, they
And
are.
so you've talked about this archetype here of, I suppose we could call it the American dream.
Yeah.
Um, and you've got obviously Superman, you've got Captain America, and you've got Cyclops in there. So, what is that archetype, and why is it so important in comic books?
I think it's kind of the guiding light. It's that archetype, this kind of Boy Scout one, is kind of where everything. It's kind of like the foundation.
Mm.
And then you can have other characters kind of bounce off that. I mean, you were saying about the kind of the American dream with Superman,
Yeah.
and Captain America. With Cyclops, it's a little different,
Mm.
because he represents the other. Um, I mean, in a wider scale, the X-Men are the other. They are, then they're only together because of what they have. And
Mm.
Cyclops is the kind of the archetypal activist, the organizer. It's just
Mm.
like how Martin Luther King or
Yeah.
Malcolm X, or even people that was involved in the Stonewall riots and stuff like that. I mean, you can actually kind of move that analogy of like
Yeah.
civil rights movement, gay rights, and stuff like that
Yeah.
into kind of the X-Men, because it is kind of the outside of the kind of society. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and he's kind of seen as that person, just like you have those activists that is that kind of seen as a leader or a voice of that particular community.
Of course. Of course. And so you get him as I kind of say the active. You think of Star Wars, you think of like the rebel, isn't it? It's that
Yeah,
kind of like you're fighting against the Empire type thing, isn't it? And
yeah.
so you feel that he's certainly not being represented or portrayed, to a great extent on screen. Has it's a really good character in the comic books. He's not just one dimensional sort of thing, but in the film,
No.
he's a bit one dimensional.
Yeah, they kind of give a lot to Wolverine, and they put. No, I'm not saying. I mean, Wolverine is a great character, not
Yeah,
particularly one of my favorites. So, but I read it and everything. But as I was saying, that with Cyclops being the counterbalance to Wolverine, it makes Wolverine better. But they've kind of moved a lot of what Cyclops is to Wolverine, which
yeah,
is I've always found really odd. I mean, don't get me started on X-Men 3, X-Men The Last Stand. I mean, they had the disservice of killing him off screen. I mean, that was just the worst.
It was pretty shocking, wasn't it? It was
Yeah.
pretty shocking. I don't know what. Now I'm trying to remember who the director is for that film because
Brett Ratner.
yes, and obviously Brett Ratner at that time was considered, well, certainly in terms of Hollywood elite, he was a very well known, popular director in terms of
Yeah.
he would get a lot of big films. I don't really know what's happened to him since actually, but
Well, he got. Well, I know he got. He was involved in the whole Me Too situation.
wow,
A lot of allegations about him.
yeah, so it hasn't been that great for him then. Okay.
No.
Moving on swiftly then. Okay.
An interesting fact: he wasn't the original person that was tapped to do X-Men 3 after Bryan Singer left the X-Men
Yeah.
franchise. It was actually Matthew Vaughn who was supposed to take over,
Okay. That's interesting.
but he didn't do it. When he went on to go and do Kick-Ass,
Hmm.
and then he eventually did come to the X-Men franchise when he did X-Men First Class.
And obviously the initial movie of that new that new kind of it wasn't how many films was it in that? Was it a trilogy or I don't remember how many films was it more than that?
5, I think it
Was
was.
it five? Well, the
I
first
think.
film of that one was
Yeah,
actually a really good film.
yeah, that's the one that Matthew Vaughn did, First
Yeah,
Class.
I was impressed with that. I thought it was a pretty decent movie actually.
Yeah, except for the black guy dies, who has a power that means that he can't die. But that's a whole other thing.
Right. I'm not going to go too much into that, but
Yeah.
Darwin, it's him, is it? Darwin, that's it.
Yes.
He should, absolutely. So that is a really interesting one, and this is I'm not going to go too much into that because we're not really talking about that. But actually,
Yeah.
that is a very I bet that divided the fandom back in the day when that happened because it's true. He should be able to adapt to anything.
Yeah, literally, his power is to adapt to literally any situation. He cannot die because he adapts to it.
So, yeah.
But then they kill him. That is the worst thing. Oh my gosh, that's as bad as The Last Stand with Cyclops
No.
dying off screen.
God, is this a race thing? Is this like because this brother's black? We're gonna be.
That's what I mean,
even him who's got an ability that is completely, he is impervious to everything. He can adapt. Oh, he's black, so we'll get rid of that guy.
yeah, that's literally what happens.
Oh dear, oh dear. Okay. Oh, you got so.
But other than that, it was a good film.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure our podcast listeners at home, they're used to the bit of witty banter that we have on the lobby with your podcast show. Oh dear me. Well, he wasn't my favorite character anyway, so I wasn't that bothered when he went.
Well, in the comic books, he's a very in the lore he's a very interesting character.
Is he really?
Yes. The basically the original X-Men were there's 5 characters. Cyclops, Marvel Girl, Jean Grey, Iceman, Beast, and Angel. When the comic book got cancelled in the late 60s, it was reimagined with an international team, the team that most people know, with Wolverine and Colossus and Storm and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, the way that they started that was that the original X-Men were actually trapped on a living island called Krakoa, and they were kind of taken, and their first mission was to actually go and save the original X-Men.
Oh wow!
So
that's what happened? Story.
Yeah. So what happened was that it was retconned in the early 2000s that wasn't the first team of X-Men to go and save the original X-Men. That there was another team, and they all died. So it was the first was a failed mission, and then it was these characters that actually kind of survived and saved the original X-Men. So that in that team was Darwin, and and he survived, and he saved the third Summers brother that we never knew about. And well, it was kind of hinted in the 90s that Cyclops and his other brother Havoc had another brother, which we later find was Gabriel, and his name's Vulcan. So
wow.
it was actually Darwin who actually saved the third Summers brother for many years, and so that's how he got brought into the kind of the law.
That's so interesting.
So a demonstration of his power, he adapted for many years on the side of a meteor protecting the third Summers brother, but yet he just got some power in his mouth and blew up.
Don't start me off about that again. I'm already. Oh dear me. Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on swiftly. Okay, so give me briefly now, and we'll come to a break in a second, and then we'll have a part two of this X-Men special.
Yeah.
What is your favorite X-Men storyline?
Oh, wow. There have been so
And I know
many
there's a lot.
over the years.
There's a lot of them, isn't there?
Yeah, but the one that will always stick in my head is quite early into when I was started to collect in the kind of early to mid 90s.
Yeah.
It was quite a radical one. It was called the Age of Apocalypse.
Hmm.
Basically, as a stunt, Marvel actually cancelled every X-Men comic, and at that time there was about 8 or 9 lines of comics,
Wow.
and they cancelled all of them and restarted them for 4 months as completely different comics. Basically, what happens is Professor X, the kind of founder of the X-Men,
Yeah.
he has a son called Legion, and
Hmm.
his son decides to go back in time to help his dad and kill Magneto before the X-Men actually become kind of form.
Yeah.
But he accidentally kills Professor X.
Oh.
So the X-Men was not formed by Professor X. So it was an alternative story, like timeline storyline where
Hmm.
Magneto actually changes his ways and kind of honors the dream of Professor X in this world. And because Professor X doesn't start the X-Men at the time that he was supposed to, Apocalypse actually takes over the world. So we had a
Ooh.
completely different kind of take on all the X-Men. You know, Cyclops was not the leader of the X-Men. He actually was part of Apocalypse's forces. You had you had Sabretooth, a character that you would, we know as like one of the main villains of Wolverine, being actually a good character. So it just
Oh
shows us
wow.
just the death of one character kind of shifts everything in the universe. I mean, basically all most humans are dead now because after kind of the central kind of ethos of Apocalypse is only the strong survive. So most humans are weak, so they're dead.
Oh my gosh. There we
So yeah,
go.
so it was one of my favorite storylines because it kind of uses the essence of those characters and kind of just
Yeah.
puts them in a world where it's completely different. So it was a really fun storyline for me.
Very nice. Brilliant. We will be back with Omar in part two of the Law Be With You podcast show. Welcome back to the Law Be With You podcast show, part two of our X-Men special. Omar, our listeners, our audience have been treated to a lot of knowledge there from you. Um,
Hope so.
brilliant episode so far. Okay, so I want to talk about some controversial stuff now because we're not going to back away from controversial topics here on the Law Be With You podcast show.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we know that X-Men is culturally relevant, and there is from what I understand, and we spoke about this before, there is a lot of identity politics um, within X-Men. What do you think of that?
It's kind of ingrained in the actual storyline itself, in the concept of in the concept of um the actual characters themselves. It's part of it.
Yeah,
So it's there from the off. So I think it's what it is, really.
yeah, it's kind of like it's part of it's written with that motive. it's written with that intent. You either love it. It's like Marmite, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now I don't know if they have Marmites in. Do they have Marmite in the States? Because a lot of our listeners are from the States.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm not sure actually. It's just
well,
one of the things you love or hate. But
yeah,
just
it's
but before we go on, I just want to say that the original concept of X-Men did not actually have those undertones. A lot
okay.
of it's a bit of a misnomer, the whole idea of it reflecting the civil rights movement from the off.
Yeah.
Um, if you read the first 25 issues of the comic book, that's not the case. That actually came in a lot later. Um,
Ah.
yeah, so the original concept was more that there was mutants out there, and
Mm,
it was a mad dash to see if they will be actually good or bad. It was either they were
mm.
going to be X-Men or part of the Brotherhood of Evil.
Yeah.
Um, but it was only when other writers came in and kind of brought that concept to the fore, like the whole idea of Xavier's dream, and
Mm.
the X-Men being heroes that the world fears and hates, but they still want to protect them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's when the civil rights aspects of it came into
Yes,
play
yes,
in
correct.
a
Yeah,
more emotive and yeah, I hear what you're saying now. Um, so X-Men, I think I've I know you say he wasn't there straight off the bat, but they've brought in identity politics in a way that's kind of coherent to that universe,
yes,
to that lore, and in that respect, they've done well with it.
yeah,
Obviously, we spoke about Star Wars, and we got to we kind of we do talk about Star Wars because there's a lot going on within the Star Wars fandom.
yeah,
Um, it's not really worked out the same way in Star Wars as it when they've kind of started to bring it, because obviously the original Star Wars. I mean, we're going back to the 70s now. George
yeah,
Lucas's sort of original sequel trilogy, and then even the prequels, that you got in the 90s as well.
yeah,
Um, they they and I think that run ended in early 2000s. They had a lot of diversity anyway. They weren't seen as sort of having a lot of identity politics really, but they had diversity within that sort of paradigm. um with Kathleen Kennedy's Star Wars, I'm sort of comparing it to X-Men now.
yeah.
What's happened there? Because obviously X-Men seem to have diversity and it's not really that much of an issue. It's seen in a very coherent way, but in Star Wars, it hasn't really panned out that way.
I think it's because they operate in two dramatically different genres.
Hmm.
With I mean, I particularly don't think Star Wars is a sci-fi in the
Okay.
sci-fi genre.
Yeah.
It's 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 more of a opera. It's more operatic. It's more tied to the monomyth than it's just that so happens to be in a different galaxy with spaceships and aliens. But
Yeah.
it could play out like Aquaman on the water, and it would still make sense, you
Hmm.
know. So, and that's kind of why I think we won't go into it, but that's why I think Last Jedi works so well because it does play up to the kind of operatic kind of tones
Hmm.
that genre kind of has. While X-Men in itself plays in the superhero genre, but as I said, within the DNA, with their identity politics, even when it wasn't, kind of reflecting what was happening at the time,
Yeah.
it was always the other. I mean, Stan Lee did say that he was being a bit lazy. Couldn't think of a way to give these characters powers, so he just said, "I'll just let them be born with it."
Oh, okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so what I mean, one of the things that I've had an issue with is a great monologue it is, but in Kill Bill,
Hmm.
um, Bill talks about Superman, about how other superheroes have to put on a mask, but Superman goes to sleep as Superman. He wakes up as Superman. But that's the X-Men. The X-Men are exactly the same.
Hmm.
They Cyclops goes to bed as Cyclops. You know,
Hmm.
the Iceman goes to bed as Iceman, and he wakes up as Iceman. Like that's who they are. And because I think
Yeah.
that's part of what it is. I mean, in the later comics, I mean, currently the current run at the moment is trying to build out mutants as their own culture,
Hmm.
their own language, their own. holidays, their own kind of rituals at this moment. So that works, and that works with diversity because they have always been played outside of what was kind of the kind of status quo.
Yeah,
So
so I suppose
I think it's kind of a
yeah,
natural progression that it kind of leans itself into diversity.
with X-Men, yeah, I totally
Yeah,
agree with that. And I think that's like you say, it's like Marmite. You either love it or you don't like it, but it is what it is. And that's a really good way of looking at it. And I think
yeah,
the Star Wars one for me is a difficult one because Star Wars had diversity anyway. Kathleen
yeah,
Kennedy has brought in a kind of identity politics within that, which is because it's interesting. It's like I suppose the question would be: is the issue semantic, or is it just semantics, or whatnot? Because I suppose with the Star Wars, the new sequel trilogy, and we are talking sort of the Force Awakens, and obviously the Last Jedi and the Rise of Skywalker.
yeah.
The issues within the fandom really, I think there wasn't really too much of a problem with the Force Awakens. I think it did well. It was a kind of very they played it safe, but it was fine.
But
Um,
do you remember the vitriol that was when I mean the first shot of the first trailer was seeing Boyega? I mean that kicked off a whole load of
yes, there was a
terrible
yeah.
backlash even just
th-
then.
there was an issue. There was a bit of a racial storm over the black
Yeah.
stormtrooper. There was some issues there. I was more annoyed about after watching the film, as we spoke about recently, actually, and also, by the way, that's a really popular episode on Christian Fandom Geek. That episode
Oh.
that we've, yeah, it's a very popular episode. That is. We spoke a little bit about sort of how I didn't like how they've used Finn. John Boyega is a really good actor. I felt
Yeah.
he was underutilized as Finn, and I didn't like the misdirection on him being a Jedi. And then kind of only at the end, you realize that in the Rise of Skywalker that he's force sensitive, but
Yeah.
they didn't even really show that fully in the movie, and it felt like, what are we? Why aren't you showing that? Um,
It's almost like Princess Leia. So she was the same in the original trilogy. It's only until the
yeah,
end that you actually really see, well, end of Empire that you actually see that she was force sensitive.
oh yeah. Although for some strange reason in the Last Jedi she turned into Superman, and it's kind of hybrid of Superman and Mary Poppins. I don't quite know what was going on there. Um, that a complete like transformation into like Superman. I was like, since when has Princess Leia been able to fly through space? I mean, if she was able
Well,
to do that the whole time, why is she using this shit?
well, well, my personal explanation for that is that the Jedi Order had been restored, and it's been 30 years, and Luke must have given her a bit of a lesson.
Oh, I'm gonna don't start me off here. She had the training that Ray didn't get. So the Ray who didn't get any training, but Princess Leia got training. Is that how we're rolling with that one? Oh dear. Oh well, there we go. Oh, let's move on away from Star Wars back to the X-Men. Okay. Okay. Who are the most powerful mutants in the X-Men comic book lore?
Well, there are many. In the X-Men, there are different designations of mutants.
Yeah.
And basically there are a set called Omega level mutants,
Okay. Tell us about these
and
guys.
they are the most powerful mutants that there are. These are ones that are basically their powers kind of they can manipulate like more than just what's just there. I mean, elemental, different things. I mean, they're basically their powers don't have an upper limit.
Mm.
So people like Magneto, he operates on the magnetic spectrum, and there is
Yeah.
basically no upper limit. I mean, this is a person in the I think mid 90s. There was a comic book called Fatal Attractions, very famous for the issue where Magneto rips the adamantium out of Wolverine's body. Um,
Ooh.
but he basically puts the world to ransom because he has said that basically he's got the power to shift magnets. So he was going to shift the whole world
Wow.
and turn the poles the other way around, basically
Oh
destroy
my
them.
gosh,
So
that's
I
not
mean,
very
this is
nice.
yeah, but I mean, this is the kind of power that he has.
Yeah.
So he is kind of known as an Omega level mutant. No upper limit, but there aren't many that can
Mm.
be who are kind of designated that. But I mean, most famously, Storm has been classed as one because she can control all the elements.
Yeah.
Um, Iceman has been because he can basically control all the moisture
Oh wow,
in the
yeah.
world and stuff like that. Um, you got people like quite an obscure character like Proteus, who is the son of Moira McTaggart, who's a very close ally to Professor X. He
Oh wow.
can warp reality, just like also Franklin Richards, the son of Mr. Fantastic and Invisible
Yeah.
Woman from Fantastic Four. He's also another reality warping character. As I was saying to you before about the Edge of Apocalypse and
Mm.
that the other heroes were disappeared from our universe, it was
Yes.
actually Franklin Richards who protected them by creating a pocket universe for them to live in for a while. So
Wow,
he was yeah. So that's how powerful he is. And then you have Professor X's son,
yeah.
Legion, who another one I was saying about. He has split personality disorder, and
Oh dear.
each personality has its own mutant power.
Oh wow.
So yeah, so he has there is no upper limit to his powers.
A little bit like can think of some of these powers that these guys have got, and then it's tremendous powers, and then kind of you think of like the sort of the physics that they must have some idea of physics, these comic book writers, because they really tap into some of the physics and laws of nature sort of thing in a
Yeah.
very vivid and beautiful way. But also, I'm just thinking of like the NBC show, I think it was Heroes,
Yes.
um, and thinking of someone like Peter Petrelli, and well, there was Silat and Peter Petrelli, I think, were the most powerful ones I remember on that show,
Yeah.
and they were characters that could have multiple powers at the same time, and it wasn't an issue to them. So that's kind of echoes of those guys from that sort of franchise.
Yeah.
Or
So basically, when that show came out, I was like, oh, that's Legion. Yeah.
I was a big Peter Petrelli fan. I have to say, season one of Heroes was amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
Too bad it never lived up to that.
I know.
I think the first series was great up until the final episode.
Yeah, the build up was amazing. It didn't quite live up to the build up, but I loved what they did with Peter, and I did see kind of a lot of Christ imagery in
Yeah.
Peter Petrelli.
Yeah.
A lot of that kind of virtuous hero, righteous heart sort of imagery in that. And talking about Christ imagery,
Yeah.
um, this is a nice link. Are there any strong Christian themes within the X-Men comic books?
Very much
And
so.
right, okay. And I heard a story. I can't remember where I come across this about Wolverine getting saved and born again.
Yes, yes, there has been that storyline, but yeah, just kind of in the concept of the X-Men and what I was saying before
Yeah,
about the original concept where the X-Men had Cerebro, which is the machine that finds mutants around the world, and then
yes,
the original kind of concept was a mad dash to kind of see if these new mutants would either be an X-Men or Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. I mean, you can
mm,
definitely see that as kind of a evangelical kind of
yeah,
thing. I mean, even just kind of looking at how these characters are tied together. I mean, the X Men are, as a group, are classed as heroes, but
yeah,
the mutant culture around it is beyond that. I mean, you
yeah.
have characters that do not have any powers that would be helpful in a kind of heroic kind of way.
Mm,
But they are part of the culture. But what I always find interesting, and I think is kind of related to kind of the Christian kind of thing, is that these are all disparate characters that are tied together by one thing.
yeah,
They have the mutant powers, but as X Men, they have a belief system.
Mm.
As an X-Man, you believe in the kind of Professor X's dream of coexistence.
Mm.
Um, so I read quite an interesting meme recently where the Avengers are seen as co-workers, but the X-Men are seen as family.
Yeah.
And they are family just because of that gene.
Mm.
They're tied together, not by anything else. And that's how it is with us as Christians, where you know we can be from all over the world, but we are all tied to that singular belief, and it's quite similar to how the X-Men are.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that's
And
powerful. That
yeah,
powerful.
and also, just as another thing, when it comes to kind of the difference between the Avengers and the X-Men,
Yeah.
I've always seen the Avengers as the keepers of the status quo.
Yeah.
These characters will defeat gods and cosmic beings just to make sure that the world goes back to how it was.
Yeah.
Where the X-Men, their whole concept is to fight for a future of a future that's changed, a better future.
Mm.
And
Wow.
it's very, very similar to, as Christians, that's what we want. We want a better future. We want to live in harmony with our brothers and sisters, and
Yeah.
that is something that is very much with it as a Christian theme. That is there.
That's powerful. That's really powerful. Um, I guess the Avengers are kind of quite pragmatic then, and I guess the X-Men would be very idealistic in a way.
Yes.
They want that, that future that is better, that is glorious, that is kind of improved, that there's a
Yeah.
directionality to where they're going. It's like we're here right now, but we believe in that ideal future, that better future for everyone.
Yeah.
Um,
And
yeah,
that's why I think it's that concept there in itself is something that I don't think any of the kind of films or TV has really, really kind of touched upon. Because if you
yeah,
did touch upon that, then the character that embodies that is Cyclops.
yeah. Okay, yeah, brilliant. We've gone full circle. We've gone back to your favorite superhero. Brilliant. What a great way to end our X-Men episode, X-Men special on the Lord Be With You podcast show. We're also on YouTube as Christian Fandom Geek. Please show some love to the show. We've got great collaborators on there, like Luke Saw and Omar. Omar, you've been absolutely brilliant again.
Oh, thank
So
you.
you've lived up to your title. And we're going to get you back on the show again very, very soon. Thank you for being on again.
No problem. Happy to be
And
here.
excellent. And we'll be with you soon. Keep safe at home, and we'll be with you very soon on the Law Be With You podcast show.